Well, I've heard some interesting conversations around the room, and markedly I've heard at least 3 times now. You know that quote about there's 30 million different experts out there spreading information on nutrition and food and what we should be believing. I hope to address that this morning and kind of the why for why we're in this situation where consumers really err on the side of what people tell them that may not truly be experts, but why they feel it's in their best interest to pay attention to some of those messaging and communication themes that are out there today. I don't know how many in the room have heard or been on the receiving end or are reading comments like this, either through the online spaces, through conversations you're having on airplanes and social circles, et cetera. But this type of communication is out there. This type of comment, this type of perception about what's going on in the food industry is very real to many people, especially those on the consumer side of the recipients of food, but not necessarily people who are active participants in it other than raising their fork to their mouth, right? I think within the industry, we can have some comments that come back with that thinking. Choosing food isn't rocket science. Let's come back to the basics of how we choose food that's great for us. If everyone would read the nutrition label, we wouldn't be in this position where people would be combating all of the considered conventional knowledge about food. And it's not as simple as avoiding one type of food when it comes to diet or the best food for the planet or maybe a production system. So my goal here today is to kind of set up a few different things. How did we get here? How did we get to a position where consumers really trust in mistrust and are highly skeptical of people that are in the industry, whether they're on the private, the public side? Also, just give you a sampling of some of the models that we've worked, some communications models that really cut through the clutter on why we're in this position, how we better communicate with consumers, and what we know about what they need to know to feel more trustworthy, more trusting of the people and the processes within food. And then give you a simple formula for jumping into these conversations with vigor and efficiency and walking away where you feel you've actually made a difference in helping them consider the realities of what's going on in food and research. So just backing up a step, a little bit about the Center for Food Integrity. We are a U.S.-based organization. Actually, a Canadian CFI will launch later this year. But we're driven solely by this mission, which is to build consumer trust and confidence in the food system. What we know is that trust isn't exactly where we'd want it to be. We feel like that's a pretty big mountain. And as our year-over-year studies show, this is something that we're going to continue to have to work at. The ways we do this and serve this mission are to research consumer opinions year over year, to take the findings of that and get that information disseminated to all sorts of groups that are within the food industry, all the way from farmers and food processors to retailers, restaurants, et cetera, as well as NGOs. To empower them to understand where consumers are coming from. We also develop programs then that are designed to communicate what's going on in the industry in a way that actually will build trust. And where there's a gap between consumer expectations and industry performance, our goal is to close that gap whenever possible. Our members and project supporters, you can find all of this information on our website, foodintegrity.org. But as you can see, we kind of serve as an umbrella organization that serves all of the different players within this broad and diverse food system. So while we're working with food companies and restaurants, retailers, et cetera, we also work through the universities. We have animal health companies, state and national commodity organizations, technology companies, et cetera. So suppliers all the way to beneficiaries of the industry. When we look at trust and serving that mission, and when we tried to boil down how did we get to this point where trusting and mistrust is the norm, we landed on the year 1968. This might not be one that jumps out to you that's significant in terms of food, but what this year represented was a year of immense change from a social perspective, and this is the year in which people really started to view institutions very differently. Within that year, you had some pretty significant challenges that were coming to the forefront, social issues. One, the Vietnam War was raging. We were in about our 5th year of that war. We had assassination of Bobby Kennedy Jr., a presidential candidate, as well as Martin Luther King Jr., huge social activist. We also saw, so you had a situation where the war was being broadcast into our home. So as we talked about digital media and the influence of that in communication and how we view the world, you had a situation where we were starting to see governments influence, militaries influence these big institutions that we thought we knew a lot about, really maybe get a little bit different color in our minds. The shades of gray started to really pop out. Also within '68, we sparked the green movement, where we saw the picture of the blue planet from outer space for the very first time on Christmas Eve. So this is only the very first year that we started to see a lot of what was going on with institutions being questioned. We go through all of the years, and I won't outline them all here, but over the last almost 5 decades of time, we've seen trust in institutions decline at a faster rate than any other time. And when we looked at what are the significant social shifts that have occurred, we came up with a list. One, it used to be that authority was granted primarily by office. So if you were in a position of power, you're a clergyman, you're the president of a company, president of a nation, you generally have the trust of the people who put you in that position. Now, authority is granted primarily by relationship. We rely on our friends, our social sphere of influence, primarily to help guide the decisions that we make and the perceptions we hold. It used to be that broad social consensus was driven by white Anglo-Saxon Protestant males. Now, as we look at social issues specifically, there's not a single consensus. There's a huge amount of diversity, global amount of voices coming into the fray on all of these, and there's not really a consensus about anything. It used to be that communication was very formal and indirect. Few television stations, same story, maybe a different, interviewed one different person on a daily basis. We've moved from mass communication to masses of communicators, and we've heard it. Where anybody with a smartphone can be broadcasting to the world in a matter of seconds. News is born on Twitter, right? So we've moved into this masses of communicators who also are informed by not great sources, right? And finally, it used to be that progress was inevitable. If science and research told us we could do something in the name of progress or efficiency, then we did it because it was the right thing to do. But now progress is possible, but society's not really sure whether we should be doing these things. So when you think about technology and food, we just heard about GMOs and biotechnology and everything that's going on in that field. There's a lot of questions. We know we can do it, but society's really questioning whether it's the right thing. We see these in other industries too, drone technology, right? So when we look at all of those social shifts that have taken place, again, these are the types of things that have gotten us to a position within the food industry that has been largely consolidated and integrated and totally industrialized that makes people question whether what they saw on Food Inc. is really the reality of today's food system. They're not able to cut through that clutter of what's going on. Compounding factors to that is the public really does know there's a change that's been taking place with food and agriculture. They may not know all the intricacies, but they do understand this is a different world. The question there is at what value am I receiving because of, as a result of all of these changes? Second, nobody can opt out of food. Right? We all have to eat. This is the baseline for humanity's survival. Not only is it necessary, as we talked about, we build our traditions around food. We celebrate with it, we mourn with it. Absolutely essential. We have a media situation where media will focus on those dramatic headlines and really create tension around different issues that people perceive as highly dramatic, highly impactful for their lives. And we know that social media, the digital age, really helps to amplify issues, providing them momentum. And we know that online influencers are taking that momentum and really skewing that information, whether it's meaning they're doing so in a way that's, they're purposefully doing that or not. That is the situation we're in. It leads us to a situation where when we ask consumers who have a high level of skepticism about the food industry, how do you make food choices today? They come back with responses like this. Lisa told us, I think mom guilt is a huge factor. If someone's telling you something's dangerous, maybe fructose, and you hear that message more than once, then you owe it to yourself to research it or quit consuming it. If I can't give my kids fructose if there's a potential problem, so we have to do our best job. You can hear that struggle in her voice with trying to find the right information, accurate information. And we know that consumers aren't necessarily empowered to go to a research site or source that they know has all the information they need. Definitely not somebody within the academic sphere. So she's in a situation where she's trying to get to the end of the maze, which is informed decision-making when it comes to walking those grocery store aisles. And in the process, she's met with all of these challenges that we found through our years of research. So as we talk about that, I wanted to present to you some of the different models for communication and what we've discovered is impactful for consumers. When CFI was first launched, we came away with this idea that if our goal is to build trust with consumers for the food industry, then we have to get to a point where we understand what drives trust. And when it came to talking back with the industry, what the industry really wants is freedom to operate, to do what you do within the rule of the law, but in a way that allows you to have access to the marketplace that you want to serve. To do that, you have to maintain your social license, which is minimal formalized regulations that allow you to support the business needs that you have. If you have that, then that means that trust is in place. So when we launched, we worked with a researcher out of Iowa State University named Steve Sapp, and found, we did a meta-analysis of 21 different studies to look at what drives trust with consumers. And the first one is influential others. This is your friends, your family, your social sphere of influence, as well as the credentialed people you rely on for guidance. This could be your dentist, your mechanic, your dietitian, et cetera. The second biggest driver, piece that drives trust is competence. So this is our science, our facts, as well as our skills and abilities to get something done. The third piece then was confidence, and this has to do with value similarity. Is this a person like me? Do they share my passions? Would I make the same decisions with them? Am I similar to them? And what we found with that model that was highly surprising to us was that values were 3 to 5 times more important than facts in driving trust. If I say that on its head, if I flip that, facts are 3 to 5 times less important than values when you're trying to build trust. And in a room of people who are very science-minded, that's a scary thing to put up on the screen, right? We don't ever want to dismiss facts in science. We absolutely have to have them. But the reality is that you have to build relationships with people through values before you can have the ability to impact what they believe and think when it relates to science. So what we came away with from that is we need to understand what sustainability means. One, for the industry, for our communications structure, and for how we run this business of food. So when we came away with that, we said, let's build a model, a definition for sustainability, and we came down to a 3-pronged definition. The first is that we have to, with anything within the industry, within individual businesses, within research, everything we do has to be grounded in ethics. Things like compassion, responsibility, respect, fairness, and truth. If we can ground in those, then we can have that values-based connection that really serve to build relationships. Second, nobody's going to ever have to throw away their science, right? We have to have this. This is what verifies that what we say we're going to do at the base of that triangle is actually doable because we can verify. The third is economic viability. We don't exist as a business, as an industry, as a system if there's not profit involved. So we've got to be able to remain economically viable through all of this. We utilize this again. This is a communications sustainability model as well as a full system or industry-wide one. When you think about that balance or that scale, the top 2 pieces, economics and science, really serve to increase people's knowledge or understanding of the science-based side of what's going on. But when you think about the questions that are being asked of today's food system, these are questions about should. And when people say should you be, should we be buying foods that have all these ingredients or labels that I don't understand or don't mean, or when you think about Lisa's comment about fructose, and we come back and say, it's okay, science says we're just fine, we're safe, we're answering a question that was never asked. And so what we have to do is go back to that triangle and come to the base. So while we've been answering questions at the top of the triangle that serve to increase knowledge, we've been ignoring this bottom piece that really serves to impact feelings and beliefs about people's value structure and how they really view perceive the industry in the first place. So we've got to start really grounding everything we do as well as the way we communicate in that ethics piece. Also coming off of that, we also looked at transparency. One of the pieces we kept hearing, this was back in 2012, was we just want the industry to be more transparent with us. And so we said, okay, what does that mean to you? We did a lot of this through qualitative research, and nobody could come up with a true definition for transparency. So we set out to understand what are the elements of transparency people are paying attention to. What is it that they want to know? What is it that impacts their understanding or their belief that transparency is being realized? And we came away from that research with 7 very strong drivers of transparency. I'll go through these at a high level. Again, you can find a full information sheet on this on the website. But essentially, we measured 33 different attitudes about what was going on in food and just in general business, what you want to receive from business, and came away with these seven different elements that contribute to trust-building transparency. The first one is motivation. So are you doing this only for maybe private interest, for profit, or are you doing this because it's the right thing to do? Second is disclosure. Are you telling us everything? Not just are you being truthful, but are you being complete in your descriptions about what's going on, even if it's not all positive? Stakeholder participation was this was at the top of the list of the things that were most impactful for being transparent. And this is, are you involving me, any stakeholder? It could be a funder, it could be the general public, but any of the stakeholder groups that the company has or the organization has, are you involving me in your process? Are you asking me questions along the way? Are you informing me of what's going on? The important piece about this one is people don't expect consensus to drive the outcome, but they do want their voice to be heard. So just having them involved in the conversation. Relevance. Is what you're doing actually relevant to me and my interests as a consumer? Clarity. Is the information concise, clear, compelling? Can I find it easily? Most of the time we kept being told online. Accurate. Is it accurate? Is it good? Are you unveiling the good, the bad, the ugly? This one ties pretty closely to that disclosure piece. And then last, credibility. What does your track record look like? Have you made missteps in the past that are going to make me maybe trust you less or give you fewer free cards, if you will? So what we know is that as you look at different companies, different sectors of the industry, organizations that are taking these, you're going to come in at different levels because each one has a track record that's different for how they've played these different elements through their history. But the goal is that if you utilize these and you actually plug them in a way that's serving the consumer needs here, then you can be perceived as more transparent, as a more transparent industry. We think that transparency is the next or the up-and-coming sustainability. Transparency will be as important in 2 to 3 years as sustainability, and those discussions that are going on today is now. I wanted to share a little bit. We've heard about sources. Everybody's an expert, right? From our 2014 survey, we asked specifically about sources. And I wanted to pull, our 2014 survey really focused on 2 different issues because you have to be pretty focused that way. So we looked at antibiotic use in farm animals as well as genetically modified organisms. So I've pulled in some sources here just to kind of give you a flavor of who people trust on different issues. And we measured this in a couple different ways. One, when we just asked people point blank, who do you trust? What sources do you trust for information on GMOs? And gave them a list and said, tell us your level of trust on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is no and 10 is high. 8 to 10 indicates a high level of trust. 0 to 3 indicates a very low level, and 4 to 7 is ambiguous. This was the general population. So these are all of the sources that we gave them, and they had the opportunity to rate. And as you can see, university scientists, if I can get my pointer over there, is the highest on the list. For the total population, which was 2,005 people, that's not a great mean score. These are all the mean scores. But the total population that's represented, about 25% of all people had a very high level of trust of that group. And you can see as you go down, what you'll be able to applaud for a second is who you see at the bottom of the list. Dr. Oz, celebrity chef, maybe a well-known food blogger. So get excited for a second, cheer, applaud, And then I'm going to tell you to be really cautious. Thanks, Jim. I'll tell you to be cautious with that, because what's happening, and you've heard it discussed here today, who should be the spokespeople for what's going on in science, the science of food. We've got all these industry experts that say, I want to do the research and let somebody else communicate it. The takeaway here is we really need your voice. We need to do it in a way that's really impactful, but without being there, there's a trusted voice that people are looking for that they're not going to be hearing from. Okay, here's where we get a little bit concerned about what we see at the very bottom. The bottom three there, we don't want these to be influential sources for people, and based on our data, this is, who do you trust? They might not be the first source of information people go to on this topic, but they are definitely somebody that has a level of exposure to folks and frequency that, although they might not be thinking about them as a go-to source, if they're hearing about this topic from those sources, certainly it's helping them think differently or pay a higher level of attention to those. In our 2014 survey as well, we looked specifically, we always look at total population, but then we looked at some specific segments, and that was moms, millennials, and foodies. And we wanted to see how the perceptions of different sources and all of the data, all the items that we tested in that survey stacked up for those different important and influential audiences. And as you can see, the biggest thing that'll probably jump out to you is the mean scores for the foodies was much higher than we saw with any other demographic. For every topic that we asked about that was food related for the foodies group, they had a higher level of concern or a higher level of trust. Even trust in the food system, they had a markedly higher level of trust in the overall food system. And what we can ascertain with looking at the whole body of data is that they really know exactly what they want out of the food system. And because the food system has this beautiful thing we call choice, they could get exactly what they want. Foodies were also less, the very, very few, I think 16% of them were in that ambiguous. They had really made up their mind. They either like the system or they don't like the system. There wasn't many people that hadn't made up their mind there. And the other thing to note is foodies don't consider this food elitist. Assume these are people that kind of define their life in terms of food. They're always thinking about the latest trend, the newest ingredients. They have kind of a pull-push strategy, whether they know it or not. They're always pulling in information, new food experiences. They go to a new city. The first thing they do, already know probably when they show up, is where they're going to eat. But then they look for opportunities to share that information. Online, especially, we see a lot of food bloggers that fit this category. So it is people that consider themselves a foodie, the more elitist, but we've defined it more broadly than that. The other thing that we did, and again, I'll keep it on the GM food side so that you can see kind of how this panned out. We wanted to put in front of them different messages for what resonates, and based on that values-based model. Could we introduce science and technical and complex information to them and have them accept it in a different way than they are today? And that's based on the fact that science alone isn't going to drive trust in these issues. And so what we did is develop several messages that had these different message elements that we wanted to be able to understand that ties back to transparency and the research that's been done there, as well as a lot of different research in the social sphere, psychology, anthropology, and sociology. And what we wanted to know is, based on your perception of mom scientist, government scientist, or a peer who shares my interest, who do you trust? And what drives that trust? And so when we put those three sources in front of them and just said, who do you trust? Overall, the mom scientist had the highest trust scores. The peer who shares my interest came in number 2. And then government scientists came in number 3. What we then did was introduce that information, had these messages put in front of them in the voice of each one of those. And it is important to note, we didn't put any visuals with it. There were no videos. It was just words on a page from the voice of this person, mom scientist, government scientist, or peer who shares my interest. And what we saw is that there was a transition that happened. So while the mom had the highest level of trust just from a who do you trust on this, based on these 3 options, her scores actually came down a little bit. The reason for that is because when you hear mom, that really connects with that values, the confidence piece. When you hear scientist, that's more the competence, and we wanted to see if that really drove trust. So while she was valued as somebody who shares my values, when you introduce that controversial subject, her trust score came down a little bit. People went, ooh, I don't know that I like that person that shares my values is talking about something controversial. The government scientist, who was seen as kind of cold and dry, that total competence, no value, really came up. All of a sudden it was, wait, this is a person. This is somebody who has children, who eats. Really basic things that we know in this room, but that the average consumer isn't thinking about when they think of government scientists. So the scores for that source actually came up quite a bit, not to overdo the scores of the mom scientists, but came up. And then peer who shares my interests had some really high scores because they had that values equation, but it went down into that third position for the overall population because there was no backing. There was no credibility that they brought to this topic. So that's the good news. And we did see some different splits where moms stayed top and top with early adopters and with the mom crowd, and a little bit different splits with millennials and foodies. And if you're interested in that, I can share that later. We also always look at where do people go to get information about the food system. And this was the first year in 8 years of doing this survey that we saw websites as the top-rated source of information. 20% of the 2005 people who participated said that they go to websites first. Interesting to note, if we also looked at Google specifically, because we joke that all these the 30 million food experts are University of Google educated. We wanted to understand how much of a resource are search engines, and specifically Google. And if you combine, these are the first place I go. So either 20% of people are going to websites, 10 are going to Google as their first source of information for food system topics, questions, issues. You've got 30% of the population that's going to those digital spaces as an influence. And that doesn't include, these were the top 5. In this list, we also had friends online and family online because we wanted to understand social media. We didn't want to call out any particular, Facebook, Twitter, any of those channels specifically because everybody has their own mix. But that was the defining point in there. With foodies, we definitely saw that online piece play more of a role. I mentioned we split out all of these. You can see that 33, with all of these different groups, early adopters, moms, millennials, and foodies, you had an even higher level of focus on that online space. So how do we make sense of this? How do we be impactful with our communications knowing what we've learned? We've got 3 simple steps. I've got 2 kids, and if I can boil things down to 3s, life is pretty happy. So that's what we did with our communications training. The first one is listen for values with a big focus on without judgment, because there's a lot of questions that for a room like this can be very silly. When consumers are coming forward with their perceptions or their questions about what's going on in the industry, it seems almost a slap in the face to have to answer questions or be on the receiving end of that. So let's listen without judgment for the value that's driving the concern that exists for them. Secondly, ask questions. I don't know how many times people say, oh my gosh, I don't know where this person heard this or read this, but here's what they said. And my question back is always, did you ask them? So try to inform yourself where they're coming from so that you can understand what they rely on, what sources of information are important for them, because that drives the perceptions that they have, and those are very important to pay attention to. It's also places that we should be in the academic community with people that understand real, true science about what's going on in food and nutrition. We should be in those spaces helping people that have connections to consumers that we don't today understand what's really going on. And then finally, that third step, after going through 1 and 2 repeatedly, you'll finally get the chance to tell your story and what you're working on and why it's important. So just a couple key takeaways. Consumers really need your help. We need your voices in this space because really consumers want to feel great about their food choices. They want to feel like they've got enough information to walk away with great food choices, feeling empowered. Understand that science doesn't explain everything or give consumers all the answers they seek, but if we can be a lifeline to provide clarity, that's a positive. Communicating in a way that embraces skepticism and fear and really serves to understand the concerns that exist. It's not easy, but it's really essential, and with a little practice, we can get great at it. And then anybody within the food industry is perfectly poised to connect with consumers. What I will say, and I heard this earlier, is that the closer you are to profit, the less credibility you have. It's a challenge. It's not something we can't overcome, but it is a real challenge. With that, just a couple resources. Bestfoodfacts.org is our consumer-facing channel where we utilize university-based experts to answer the questions we get about food directly from consumers. Everything from the science-y to the silly. And then foodintegrity.org, this is our organization's website. You can find a list of members, the research summaries, the programs that we put on, as well as the summaries of our most recent research that was launched in December of 2014. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Where were the health professionals on where do people seek health food or food information from? Did they rank at all?
They did. We've got a different slide, and I would be happy to share that with you. That one was specifically for GMOs. I wanted to have consistent data to see how it shifted. Good. When we ask about dietitians, we do polling and surveys on Best Food Facts as well, so we've got more of that consumer lens over time. But it's high. Anybody with that science and credential is there. We purposely don't say like a company nutritionist or a company dietitian because we know that connection to profit falls down. It's definitely there. And one of the things that I would challenge is that we've got to find a way to get more dietitians, more people that have dedicated their life to the study of nutrition in general, anybody that's in that science realm, a broader voice.
Do you see a role for physicians and nurses? Because
Absolutely.
The dietitians in my health sector, 100,000 healthcare employees, 400 dietitians.
Yep.
Edge of the wedge. So are you able to identify a role for other healthcare professionals?
Yeah.
Promulgating nutrition messages?
And people definitely also trust their healthcare provider, which is a scary thing. I think you mentioned it earlier. The level of nutrition education that goes to MDs is slim, right? So 0. So I think there's one class, is what I've been told. So I think the other challenge is, I describe my role with CFI as everything consumer. Research the consumer, communicate about the consumer to the food industry, and then connect directly to consumers. I think this is something we have to look at from a nutrition perspective. And these private-public partnerships, how do we not only understand what's going on, but then work across the industry, kind of your internal strategy, to inform? How do we do some internal workings to get MDs, nurses, nurse practitioners, more either asking more questions of us and plugging the nutrition professionals in, or having a set of here's general guidance that's out there. I don't know how to navigate the systems today, especially within Canada, but I think there's a huge amount of potential to be done, of work to be done to really provide a cross-section, provide general information, a resource that can be there, and not speaking out of turn, if you will, because I think consumers go to their physician and want answers, and the physician doesn't have enough time to try to, research a whole new database of our world of information. So it's kind of provide what I think I know today, but it's not really necessarily researched or based in the academics that nutrition is teaching. Yep.
Mary, last question.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask you a question in terms of one of your earlier slides. You said that values are 3 to 5 times more important than facts.
Yes.
And if you look at what the efforts, and I'll say is something example like our nutrition facts table or the campaigns that they're all based around facts. Mm-hmm. So how do you bring educational messaging around facts, but up their ante in terms of bringing in something that resonates in the value sphere? Because I think what we've been doing is separating facts in the context of the values that consumers hold where they may use those facts. So how do you see bringing those together? And you gave a few examples, but I'm just wondering,
Yep.
if that's where we're going to have to go, how do we start approaching that?
Yep. It was mentioned earlier, we wanted to show the faces of food, right? We have to go back to people. So if people trust you, facts don't matter. If people don't trust you, facts don't matter.
Pretty much, yeah.
Right? So this is a challenge. I was saying earlier, peer-reviewed in this room means a whole bunch. To consumers, peer means a whole bunch. It's equally as impactful. The ways that you communicate that are to think about who you are first and foremost as a person. Are you a mom? Are you a grandma? Are you a somebody that loves gardening? Do you do marathons? What are your passions in life? How do you translate into the concerns that you're hearing? That Lisa, that quote that I gave, we have to do our best jobs. The way I would come back with her and try to connect is, as a mom who's busy and has no time to try to figure out which source to trust, I'm with you. Nobody's more concerned about what goes in my child's mouth than me. And if I can understand who grew it, where it came from, what chemical is on it, all that stuff, we all feel more empowered to make great decisions. What I can tell you from what I know, and you have to put this in your own lens, I have the opportunity to work with more than 200 experts day in and day out to understand what's going on in food. I'm really interested to understand more about what you've heard about fructose. Tell me more about that. So you have to frame it in something that's similar and, most importantly, truthful. You can't be something you're not. So you have to put on that lens of, here's who I am, here's what drives me, here's what I'm passionate about, here's how it connects to you. Because we all have these value circles, and I'll talk about this later with the students. We have these value circles that kind of are our own identity. We have to find where they overlap with people who are asking questions. That's a real opportunity, and I think a lot of the times we feel like we have to be on the defensive, because they're hard. They're hard questions. They're asking questions that come through a lens that might be 50% true and 50% not, at best in some cases. And so you have to cut through the clutter and really focus on the truths of both of you to be able to have any impact in those conversations.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just a quick question. I'm one of those cold and dry government scientists. So I'm wondering, when you look at the university scientists, was there a difference if that university scientist was just tied to the university, but when they had an industry tie, or a government tie, or a tie with somebody else, how did that percentage change, that trust?
It definitely went down. And we've this idea of transparency. The year that we tested that, we also tested the theory that big is bad. The reason that profit, the government, the trust in government, because it's an institution, as I mentioned earlier, has gone down. And I'd be happy to share those individual slides. But big is bad. Literally, we saw a 20% shift in the level of trust when we swapped out the word big versus small, as it related to food companies, as it related to farms. We said, a small farmer is likely to put their interest ahead of mine versus a large farmer. We said factory versus, family versus corporate. On the food company side, we did large, small. We also did national versus local. Every time we did that, we saw at least a 20% shift in the level of trust that they would give to somebody that's perceived as small versus large. So I'll be happy to share that data with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.